we need to work together as researchers and as teachers and policy developers to be like, how can we address this issue within a maths classroom?
Yeah.
How can we ensure that acquiring the language of mathematics happens? Because I went for my honors to township schools, and they were seeing Sesotho as a problem. Because they're like, these kids, they're talking about kopanya. It's not a problem, because then you can use sight words,
Yes.
right? Use visual representation of, the symbol,
Yeah.
and then the language in Sesotho,
Yeah.
but also in English, and the different synonyms that
Yeah.
that word has in English.
Yeah.
So that in class they know, okay, when I see this sign, I associate it in all of the languages
Yeah.
that I have.
Yeah. Good day. Welcome to another episode of Discover Talent with Vico.net. Today I'm with Kedibone Ndweni. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
No, I'm very well, thank you. You're so soft-spoken.
Can you hear me though?
I can hear you now. How are you keeping?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I feel like I'm in a period of just trying to figure myself out.
Yeah.
But in general, I'm doing good.
No, that's great. I've been so looking forward to engaging with you. You're so passionate about education and training,
Yeah.
in STEM careers, STEM fields. How did that come about?
It started very earlier on in life. I've always been passionate about school in general. I was a top kid, competing, public speaking, maths Olympiads. So I've always been passionate about school in general. But when I was doing matric, I realized that a lot of the students, because they would come up to me and ask for assistance in maths and in science. And through that, I realized that the problem they had wasn't necessarily the content of what we were doing in class. It wasn't physics, but it was understanding. So my passion started from there, because then I wanted to, create ways in which people from different levels of understanding can capture or can understand physics and mathematics.
Yeah.
And because of that passion of both understanding and application modules or subjects, when I got to university, or when I went to to incorporate both the passions that I have. So the passion for development and the passion for STEM courses.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I didn't know if there was a course incorporating both.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm a public speaker. I do public speaking in school, but I'm a passionate maths student as well. Like, I love maths.
Yeah.
I love physics.
Yeah.
So he sat down with me and was like, you can apply for education.
Yeah.
And I was like, education? When you're in high school, like, you don't expect people to, like, study education, expecting metallurgy or, all these big degrees. And I was like, okay, education. I'll speak to my parents, my grandmother and my mother, and I'll hear what they have to say. And they were not for the idea. But at that point, I knew that I wanted to do a course that incorporated both of my passions.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. But in undergrad, the vision wasn't really clear, right? We went to school, did teaching practicals, and I saw that the impact was micro level, classroom-based. But my passion went beyond the classroom, because I was like, if I'm going to impart my knowledge in this classroom, what about every other maths student in South Africa? Then I had another session with an academic advisor.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm very passionate about maths, but I'm very passionate about languages as well.
Yes.
Moving forward, what can I do?
Yeah.
And the advice was, before that, I went to a conference, YALI, Young African Leadership Initiative, which was an initiative by Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And there I saw a lot of young leaders doing a lot of big things in their countries, from Southern African countries. And that drove me, that drove my passion to want to be in education and have an impact macro level and not just micro level. So that's when I went to my academic advisor, had a conversation with them, and they advised me to study curriculum but focusing on mathematics.
Yeah.
Because then they're like, right now, as an undergrad, you do not have research methods. So you can see the problem. Because one thing I realized about myself is, as somebody who is passionate about STEM courses, I am an innate problem solver.
Yeah.
So when I see that a problem exists, I automatically want to find solutions for those problems that exist.
Yeah.
And they're like, that is a very good skill to have in research. So then I applied for honors. And I realized also that, yes, I love maths, but I also am passionate about policy development.
Yeah.
So honors level introduced me to curriculum, policy development, and mathematics research.
Yeah.
And in my maths research, my supervisor at that time was very passionate about language and maths. That's when I got introduced to Prof. Paking, the research that she has done and the work that she has done in South Africa. And that was my passion, because I knew that I love languages, I love maths, and I love development.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, Prof. Paking is doing something similar to what I would want to do in terms of like making change in the space of maths education.
Yes.
And then I worked, while I was doing my honors, I worked as a facilitator for an academic literacy program. So there what we do is we try to bridge the gap between high school kids and when they get to university and having to have academic literacy. Because when it comes to like research, they don't know how to structure their sentences, referencing. So all these kids, especially in the STEM courses, they're very good at their core modules. But when they have to do research, they struggle. So then I taught students from the faculty of science, like different courses in STEM. And I taught them how to structure their sentences. So the content was very much still, what they would do in class. But now I would ask them questions about, okay, how would you start this conversation? How would you structure the sentence?
I mean, you've said quite a few things there, right? And maybe let me start with where you've ended off, which is, and I'll come to this passion you have and how do we make people love maths and physics, right?
Yeah.
But where you ended off was around the core skills they seem to have there of maths. But structuring it, it's potentially the challenge, right? Or put different to comprehension, which is you still have to explain what you've done, right?
Yeah.
In order to make sense, in order to resolve problems, the two go hand in hand. So it's not one without the other. And I find that to be quite a compelling insight, to develop. And the second thing I think for me is that the route that you followed, it's easy when we think about the challenges that we have, the skills challenges in particular around the STEM field. We tend to think that these skills will develop themselves, right? Whereas we need the Kedibones to be involved to firstly teach this, right?
Yeah.
Train people around this and produce them. So you are deep in what I call the STEM factory of producing, these future talents moving forward. So how do we create this love, right? Because I might be wrong, this might be a generic statement, but if you go to your average kid at school and say, let's go to maths class and physics, it's like, you got to be kidding, let me go to the sports field. So how do we generate that love?
I mean, when you're reading articles and you're hearing different like schools of thoughts in the space of maths education, I came across a concept called mathematics anxiety. You find that from crash, kids already have that fear of maths, and that is instilled by various factors. It can be parents at home, being like, oh, maths is hard. I can't help you with the maths homework. Maths is hard. And when they get to school, you find teachers that are not fully equipped to help the kids acquire. Because maths and STEM and physics, all of them are languages on their own.
Yeah.
We have the language of mathematics, we have the language of physical science. So in mathematics, when we talk about difference, it's different from when we having our informal conversation. Because when I'm talking with you right now and I'm saying difference, I'm talking about separating two things.
Yeah.
But in a maths classroom, I'm talking about subtraction.
Yeah.
When I'm saying to find the product in maths,
Yeah.
it's different from an EMS class.
Yeah.
Because then EMS class, I'm like, buy a product.
Yeah.
But in maths, I'm like, find a product.
Yeah. And that's comprehension right there.
So then you find that kids are confused from the get-go because there's no that level of like foundation that is being built. And maths anxiety, like I said. And it's not just one person's fault, but it's a combination of factors. From the get-go, we were talking yesterday about games, like our indigenous games,
Yeah.
decade,
Yeah.
right? Introducing that from earlier on, instead of giving your child an iPad, have them play decade or give them blocks. Yeah. And the nice thing about using blocks is you can even do a research there. When you're talking about Vygotsky, he was talking about from abstract to concrete. So you are introducing algebra to a child who doesn't even know how to speak yet.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is they're trying to figure out the different or the similar colors in the blocks, different sizes. They're trying to match up, right? So from there on, we're talking about the like terms in algebra. So you are developing algebraic thinking. By the time this child gets to grade 5 or grades where algebra is being introduced, it's no longer this fear of algebra, this abstract thing. Because in their mind, they're like, okay, I know that I have to, it doesn't mean that when I see an object, it has to be associated with a number.
Yeah.
Then that's where you introduce like abstract concepts from an early age.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a responsibility of both the teachers and the parents at home, the types of games that you allow your child to play with. Because in that, you develop the love for maths. If they see that, okay, Dikedo, I used to count. When they get to a maths class and they're like, okay, count, it's not an issue for them to start counting. But if you just like count from the get-go, then the child is like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Let's start counting.
Yeah.
So that love for maths is not started or the foundation is not built in high school.
Yeah.
But from when the child, starts playing around as a child, you have to start developing the love for maths.
Absolutely. And I think you're spot on, right? Because by the time you get to high school, it's a bit too late. From early childhood development through your foundation phases, that's when we should be making this exciting, right? We should be, using today's language, gamifying all of this. Find the modern decade, right?
Yeah.
Because times have moved on. It's not to say the indigenous games don't have a place. Of course, they've got a place, and they're quite fun. But the reality is that you are competing, with your PlayStation.
Yeah.
So how do you fuse those two, right? And I think there's an opportunity there. So that, like you say, downstream, the concept of mathematics, it's a non-issue. Now we focused on the deeper language of it, right? No, that makes perfect sense to me. And you progressed, obviously, to get your Masters of Science in mathematics education at University of Bristol. How was that? How was that experience?
Applying for the course, I always knew that I wanted to do mathematics education, but it was a matter of where, because I had to look at the difference between structures in South Africa, like how they structure the program, and in the UK. And what I liked about Bristol specifically is the passion that they had for maths education and the collaboration that they had with different scholars. I mean, like I said, I'm inspired by Prof. Paking, and she was a visiting scholar at the University of Bristol. So the fact that they already had work, not just focusing on the UK, but in South Africa as well, I was like, I want to be in an institution where it's not just focusing on one context, but we are looking at the issue of language and maths and STEM within a global context. So that's what motivated me to apply for the University of Bristol. And in terms of funding, I always knew that I wanted to get Shivning because of being inspired by the friends that I had on Facebook and seeing them, okay, there's this scholarship, they're going to the UK, it's fully funded. I was like, what's the scholarship?
Yeah.
So then I did my own research and I applied the first time. I did not get it. I applied the first year, I did not get it. And then I went and consulted with my friends, like, please read through my essays. Do you see any issues? Please, like, help me out in terms of like if the tone is wrong.
Yeah.
Because I know in terms of like the content, it is what I want to say.
Yes.
But in terms of maybe how, because if you're too connected or emotionally connected to a body of work, then you can't really see an issue with it.
Yeah.
But if you get external perspectives, then you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have structured it in that way. So the second time I applied, got through to an interview. And then I also got assistance. Like, talking really helps because then your ideas, when they're in your mind, it's like these big ideas.
Yeah.
But then when you talk to another person, they're like, okay, but you said so many things. Like, I don't understand because I'm not you.
Yeah.
I don't have this passion for maths. So as a person who's not in maths, please try to make me understand. So then I had conversations with my friends, and then I had the interview, and I got it. And I went to do my master's in mathematics education at the University of Bristol, which is a top 10 university in the United Kingdom.
Yep.
And it's a Russell Group university. So it's a very good institution. And within that program, I got to be exposed to a lot of students from like different contexts. I got to learn how students from China learn or how they acquired maths in their country. So within that and within the conversations that you have, you also learn about like different contexts. But what the course also allowed me to do was learn about the UK context, because then you go to classes and you see, okay, this is how they teach maths. And within that context, when we're dealing with language, what is the issues that they're dealing with? Is it similar to South Africa? But there you see, okay, there's a lot of immigrants, kids of immigrant parents. You see, okay, language is an issue because we see these students from countries that have conflict, that have recently moved to the UK. So how do they navigate that? Two students from one country, they can't speak English at all. Like, there's zero comprehension to English. So how is the teacher trying to help the students understand or have them acquire the language of maths? Remember I said one thing that is similar between the UK and South Africa is the language of maths can only be acquired through English, right? Because here in South Africa, the language of teaching and learning is English. In the UK, the whole, like, everything is done in English, right? So you have to first acquire English before you can acquire maths. So I had to go to classrooms and see how students learn mathematics, students from different walks of life. And also with the work that I did at the University of Bristol, it's a widening, every university in the UK has it. It's a widening participation program where they get students from different faculties and they give them a brief of what the university wants to achieve. So they gave me a brief. They were like, we have this issue where there's a division between black students and white British students. With white British students, we don't have a problem with attaining them in the STEM courses.
Okay.
But with your Somali students, like the kids from immigrant families, we have an issue because they don't even come to university, let alone do STEM courses. So with your expertise, what projects can you come up with to help us achieve this goal of attaining black students to do STEM courses? And within that, we created multiple programs. We had a student who was doing medicine. another student was different courses in the STEM
Yep.
field. And we were like, let's create a fun lesson
Okay.
where we introduce what we're doing, right? So it doesn't help to just say to a person, oh, this is fun, right? Come study medicine. Medicine is fun. But if you go into a classroom and you physically dissect something, then you bring that excitement to a person who's doing their GCSEs or even like K3 or, different levels. So we did that and we saw progress because then they would ask a lot of questions because then we were the selling point, right? As an individual who's doing maths education, as an individual who's doing medicine, as an individual who's doing applied stats or whatever,
Yep.
we were the selling point, right? So then they would ask questions, and it was a program that went like it was a 3 months or 4 months program. So by the end of that program, then a lot of them started applying to the University of Bristol.
Yep.
So then we saw the end result by the end of that program. And the other thing that we did online talks with them, like mentoring and telling them, okay, this is what the course is about. Because remember that because of COVID and also because of access, you can't really access all the schools. So you have to also incorporate technology. So you can't physically go to every school, but to the schools that we can physically go to, we use like an online platform to do the very same thing that we did with other schools. So with that, I saw that, okay, doing this course here doesn't just help me, or the classroom context doesn't help me, like build me as this person who's a maths educator or a mathematics education scholar, but the extra things that I'm doing outside as well are, building me up to be a person who's, fully equipped to be able to reviewing policies, right? Because one of the courses that I used was like reviewing global policies and curriculum development and curriculum designing. So it's like all of these small courses and all of these extra things that I'm doing are helping me become, an aspiring mathematics educator, a mathematics education scholar,
Yeah.
who's not just going to be impacting change in a classroom, but like I said, development as well, because you're developing these youth through programs.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Just to test something there in your example of the United Kingdom, right? The immigrants versus, can I call them your naturalized white British students. Comparing that locally as well, right? In terms of the delivery of maths and science through the language of English. Are you alluding to a fact that language is potentially one of the barriers? So if we delivered, because the Somali example, right, when I contrasted here, let's say it's a Motswana child, right? Are you saying that potentially if we delivered maths and science in local languages, that could be potentially a different result to what we're seeing, because there is this comprehension issue, right? Let alone trying to get into the language of maths.
What you're saying is very interesting because there's a lot to unpack there. You were talking about language as a problem, and you're talking about using local languages, which is language as a resource,
Yeah.
right? So instead of seeing Zulu as a problem, that this child who speaks Zulu doesn't know English, that is a problem.
Yeah.
You are seeing, in a mathematics context, you're seeing language as a problem,
Yeah.
right? And that is, according to different scholars and according to me as well, that is a very pragmatic way to view language, right? Because from language, there's resources like that students can use, like linguistic resources that they can use. For example, Sesotho. When you speak Sesotho, talking about diketo, you translating that indigenous knowledge as a resource to learning arithmetic, right? So you don't say, you playing diketo or you speaking Sesotho or you with your home language and your culture, you are a problem. But you're saying, how can we bring that language within a mathematics classroom to ensure that the goal is still acquiring the language of mathematics? So if I'm able to say, okay, I'm introducing this topic based on your indigenous knowledge, then it's easy for a child from the township to be like, okay, diketo, I know diketo, instead of saying pizza, right? So then language is not seen now as a problem, but as a resource, because you're trying to like, as a researcher, as a maths teacher, you are also learning or doing research about or immersing yourself in the culture of your students. You know, I have kids from this background in Zulu, they play these games. Then how can I use all of those to make sure that I achieve my goals within the mathematics classroom?
Yeah.
And other scholars are saying maybe also in terms of, because, you know, there's especially in township schools, transition from grade 3 to grade 4, right? Where in grade 1, 2, 3, they do everything. The language of teaching and learning is in Sesotho or is in Xhosa or is in Zulu. But when they get to grade 4, the language of teaching and learning is in English, but they also get introduced to more subjects.
Yeah.
So the teachers have to, as a maths teacher, you have this dual role of being both a maths teacher and a language teacher.
Yeah.
But the time doesn't allow, and the number of students doesn't allow you to reach every student.
Yeah.
So we need to work together as researchers and as teachers and policy developers to be like, how can we address this issue within a maths classroom?
Yeah.
How can we ensure that acquiring the language of mathematics happens maybe from the get-go, right? How can we ensure that it's not a barrier? Because now when they get to grade 4, because I went for my honors to township schools, and they were seeing Sesotho as a problem. Because like, these kids, they're talking about kopanya when they get to grade 4. But I want them to understand that it's addition.
Yeah.
You know, it's plus.
Yeah.
You know, all these synonyms. But they're talking about kopanya.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's not a problem, because then you can use sight words,
Yes.
right? Use visual representation of, you know, the symbol.
Yeah.
And then the language in Sesotho,
Yeah.
but also in English, and the different synonyms that
Yeah.
that word has in English.
Yeah.
So that in class they know, okay, when I see this sign, I associate it in all of the languages
Yeah.
that I have.
Yeah. No, I can clearly see, and I think this was also part of your research, right? In innovative ways of teaching methodologies in STEM. I can see that coming out. And by the way, transitioning this and pivot into the corporate sector, it's still an issue as well, because it follows you, right? What role do you think what you do in education, you know, in the STEM fields, how can the corporate sector benefit from this? I've got one or two thoughts around this, but I'm quite interested in terms of some of your insights.
I mean, we're talking about our parents, right? Our parents who have no access to the language of banking, for example, but they need to do, like, to have accounts, investments. They don't know the difference between compounded interest. Like, they don't know these terms, right? But what I think the corporate companies, organizations should do is find ways to bridge the gap, or find people who have the skills to bridge the gap,
Yeah.
right? So is it like materials that they can develop to ensure that every customer that comes in really understands what they're talking about? And financial literacy programs as well. Like, are there people, like, are we as a bank going to the people and ensuring that they have access to our products
Yeah.
fully, and they understand what is going on? So there needs to be, like, you know, when you create a curriculum in classroom, where you're like, okay, I see the issue, what is the goal? I need to ensure that people that come into the bank understand what is happening. They know that, okay, I want an advisor, I want this and this and that. So therefore, as a bank, we need to hire somebody that we're able to go to the people. And that can also translate into health as well, right? We need health educators to go to people, and especially when you look at Black women and the you're talking about, like, the reproductive issues that we have. It's not really something that is spoken about. it's lack of knowledge. You see, okay, a person has fibroids, a person has endometriosis, but they don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But if you have a combination of, yes, professionals, you have a doctor, but you have somebody who's also a person who has the skills to develop the program and is able to, because as a specialist, you are speaking about these terms that are like, health specific, but you have a person who's like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but now I need to translate what you're saying to the average person in the township. So we're going to create a program to ensure that what you're saying is brought down to the level of our people.
That's very good insight, because what you're saying is that whether it's public sector or private sector, customers or your common citizens, right? For you to deliver your products and services to your average person on the ground, um, that we were speaking about in terms of the comprehension, the concepts, how you explain it, the delivery of it. Don't assume that it's known, right? You have to be able to explain it in order for you to realize your potential as an organization itself. So it's not just about I suppose we are the HR directors conference, right? So, which is typically mostly private sector. So it's not just about your own employees or the talent you're trying to get in. Perhaps where we haven't dialed in enough is that your customer base, where whatever you're producing and selling into, you've potentially left them behind, right? By not embracing what STEM means, its potential, and how it can unlock value in your own business. So that's a very good insight there. So earlier you mentioned that you were part of the Young African Leaders Initiative. Did you meet Barack Obama, by the way?
No. I did not. I met future Barack Obamas.
You met future Barack Obamas,
Yes.
right? How was that experience, that initiative?
That experience was very much needed because, like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to do with education. Like, I had all these ideas in my mind, and I didn't know how to have an impact using my skills.
Yeah.
And I went there and I saw a person from Malawi having this project in health, having this project in education, So I met and I was inspired because, the one thing about conferences is chances are you're going to forget the content of what was said in the conference. 1 year down the line, and they ask you, the second day of the conference, who was the speaker? What was the speaker saying? Chances are you're going to forget.
Yeah.
But the connections or the human connections that you make in those conferences is what is important. Because years later, I can still even see the projects that they have. And we even had a collaborate, but it didn't really work out. But it was a start of something that if you meet people from different contexts, you can collaborate. Because then they have insight that maybe in South Africa we don't have. And then you're like, okay, if in Malawi they can do this, in South Africa definitely we can do it.
Yeah.
So we exchange ideas as people from different contexts. So those relationships last longer than the actual conference itself.
Yeah.
So I think for me, Yale played that role with the relationship that I had with the other delegates, but also with the US Embassy. Because then the relationship that I had with the US Embassy through that program, later on they were able to call me and be like, we want to create, we want to help unemployed youth develop goal-setting skills, interview skills, public speaking skills. Do you think you have the skill set to develop such a program? And I was like, yes, I can volunteer to create such a program. And it was a 6-part in collaboration with the NYDA. So it was a collaborative effort between the US Embassy and NYDA. So I was there because the NYDA brought the youth, unemployed youth, and the US Embassy brought in the resources. And I was one of the resources that was utilized.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, Kedibone Ndweni, she is passionate about education and training in STEM fields. What you're doing is fantastic work. Please keep doing it. We need more of you. because we need this skill set in abundance, not just locally. It's a global challenge that
Yeah.
we have, and we need to do more. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.